Hello, dear students. I believe that all of you are safe and fine at this difficult time of lockdown. I miss physical interaction with you. As a part of my effort to reach you, I will keep you updating about your syllabus contents, all these through some lectures, sometimes audio, sometimes video, and sometimes through other materials. The present one is on labor reforms in India, issues and challenges, which is in the MA final semester syllabus of Indian economic policy. I had sent some materials for your early reference regarding these labor reform issues. And now I will share some more insights. Please see the statement which I have supplied to you earlier in my WhatsApp share. The statement of Arvind Pangaria, the former Niti Aayog Vice Chairman, to quote, the labor situation is incredibly complicated. When you go from 6 workers to 7 in a firm, the Trade Unions Act kicks in. When you go from 9 to 10, the Factories Act kicks in. And when you go from 19 to 20, something else kicks in. It happens again when you go from 49 to 50 and 99 to 100. The biggest killer is the Industrial Disputes Act, which says that if you are a manufacturing firm with 100 workers or more, you cannot dismiss any of them under any circumstances unless you get prior approval from the government. Unquote. Pangaria reads it in this way. So even if you go bankrupt, you still have to pay your workers. These are important consequences because investors are not getting to enter into an industry if they cannot exit. मैं अंदर जाऊंगा तो बाहर निकलने का रास्ता नहीं है, so why should I go inside? So India has a very pernicious set of labor laws, and that really is the reason why Indian firms have remained so small on an average. So that is the observation of Pangaria. So this sets an context of labor reforms in India. You all know labor is in the concurrent list of Indian constitution, meaning that here both the central government as well as the state governments can enact laws. So it is obvious that there are many laws. At present, there are 44 central laws and more than 100 state laws governing the subject. So this often creates some kind of chaos, some kind of anomaly even, some kind of mismatches and discord. So this also gives us to relook the issue from the present paradigm of industrialization, especially in the new economic regime. So what is the need for labor reforms in India? So we can judge it or elaborate it, analyze it from three different viewpoints. The first one is employer's viewpoint. From employer's viewpoint, they need labor reforms because it enhances ease of doing business in the country. That is also a government viewpoint. Government is having some scheme like ease of doing business. You may raise question, how does it contribute to develop or to improve in ease of doing? You know, companies are under pressure to innovate, redesign, and technologically upgrade the products to suit their customer. And which is not possible without restructuring and resizing their labor force. In addition, laws need to be reviewed with the changing needs of the economy, such as higher level of productivity, competitiveness, and investment promotion. You need some kind of flexibility in the labor market. Otherwise, firms will always be skeptical in recruiting people because how to handle them. So if the market situation turns grim, then they should have the liberty to fire them or not. That is a question for them. So labor reforms are very important to boost the economy's manufacturing sector. Labor laws need to be reoriented to address the emerging needs of the service sector also, not just the manufacturing sector, but the service sector also. And the new technology sector also. You need to have some kind of relook at the existing labor laws. Then from employees' welfare viewpoint, you also need to have some reforms. You know, with the employment in the formal sector, which is presently less than 10%. That means out of the 100 people working in Toto, less than 10% are in the formal sector. More than 90% of people are in the informal sector. So we need to have some proactive labor market reforms to care for the bulk size of our labor force who constitute more than 90%. Because laws are already there for the 10%. So giving workers greater protection helps increase productivity by giving workers more incentives to invest in firm-specific skills. Worker protection, that's a big issue, which leads to more egalitarian outcomes in the society. So workers' interest should also be analyzed from the viewpoint of the new, industrial policy, new economic regime. There is all the time there are complaints that workers' interests are compromised. So that is an issue to be looked after. Then from government's point of view, you also need some labor reforms. How and why? That the government is pursuing labor reform vigorously to realize a larger goal. What is that? That to link three key flagship programs such as Skill India, Make in India, Start of India, all this. So there is no much headway in all these government schemes, the dream schemes. The success of all this depends to some extent on labor reforms. You know, the Economic Survey 2018-19 noted that factories in the western state of Rajasthan employing more than 100 workers grew at 9.3% per annum for the last 2 years. And after deregulating, this was the reality. 9.3% growth was realized. So, but before you see the reform was enacted, the growth rate was 3.7%. I make it clear. Rajasthan is a state in which it has enacted labor reforms. After that, there has been a study for the industries which have employed more than 100 workers. So after enactment of this act, this reform, the growth rate in those industries which are employing more than 100 workers was 9.3% per annum for 2 years. But before that, if you compare, then it was just 3.7%. So this gives a case that if you go for labor reforms, your growth rate will be augmented. So this is a sign, the government says, that reforms make it easier for companies to sack people, could ironically create more jobs by allowing those firms to be adept, to be nimble. Meaning that this seems to be quite paradoxical, that if you have liberty to sack people, then how can it help in giving more employment and increase productivity? But this has been a reality. So Rajasthan experienced that model is before us. Therefore, the government has taken initiatives. The present central government has begun the process of consolidating the existing 44 labor laws into a more manageable setup for new codes. And what are they? They are basically wages, industrial relations, social security provision, and health and working conditions. I repeat, earlier there were 44 labor laws. Now the central government is reorganizing all this into just 4 different codes which relate to wages, number 1, industrial relations, number 2, social security, welfare and occupational safety, all these things, number 3, and finally the 4th one is health and working conditions of laborers. Then let me come to all these in greater details. The first one is relating to wages, where the objective is to raise income, because wage, wage is affected income. So increase in wage means increasing in income. And that should also have a tendency to formalize the workforce. So, that casualization phenomenon should be reduced to the possible extent. So what has been attempted so far? The government has repealed the Payment of Wages Act 1936, the Minimum Wages Act 1948, the Payment of a Bonus Act 1965, and the Equal Remuneration Act 1976. So 4 pre-existing acts relating to wages have been repealed. What are they? The Payment of Wages Act 1936, the Minimum Wages Act 1948, the Payment of Bonus Act 1965, and the Equal Remuneration Act 1976. All these have been repealed altogether. Then, what is in vogue now? There is a new code that is known as the Code on Wages, which has been passed by the Parliament in July 30th by our Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. The Codes on Wages 2019. So what does this code say? The following are the highlights I want to tell you. So what is the, it is to create new jobs and to ensure greater welfare to the currently employed workforce. That is the goal it envisages. Now, what are there? That the new law mandates a national minimum wage of rupees 176 per hour. Per hour. Minimum wages act are there in wages acts are there across the country in different states, but there is always question regarding their enforceability, whether they are being implemented or not. But here comes a stringent act, a code which says if you are employing a person, you have to pay 176 rupees per hour. When I'm talking about employment, dear students, please understand this is not agricultural employment. This is employment in industrial sector and service sector. Minimum wage should be 176 rupees per hour. So the laws which were earlier in practice were very, very complex in structure. That complexity has been done away with by the Wages Act 2009. According to the government, before making this act, government had done a survey, which is known as periodic labor force survey. 2017-18 government observed, the survey report observed that 45% of employees in the formal sector are paid less than the minimum wages. Not to speak about the informal sector. In the formal sector, 45% of the employees are paid less than minimum wages. So once this code is in place, then those who are in the bottom ladder of employment will get some more wages, and those who are in the informal sector, in industries and services, will get some more wage. So this will directly promote their welfare. And the second one, the second law, wage reform code, is in relation to industrial relations. The industrial relations code has been tabled in the parliament. The IR code, Industrial Relations Code 2019. This seeks to amalgamate, simplify, and rationalize provisions of three central enactments relating to industrial relations. What are they? There was something known as Trade Union Act 1926, Industrial Disputes Act 1947, Industrial Employment within bracket Standing Orders bracket close Act. So Industrial Employment Act 1946. The Industrial Relations Code 2019 is to replace all the erstwhile acts existing in this particular sector. In this act, fixed term employment is in this code, I should not say act because it has not been approved by the parliament. It is still under discussion. So in this code, what is there? The fixed term employment is redefined. This means engagement of workers on the basis of written contract for a fixed period with all statutory benefits. Important is that all statutory benefits like social security, wages, provident funds, etc. on par with regular employees doing similar work. Thereby, it extends to the entire industry. That is important. It is not selective in its application. Once it is implemented, this will apply to all industries. You know, this fixed term employment is a proposition in this industrial relations code, which is hugely contempted by labor union. They say that this is a way to fire people. So this will casualize people. What does this fixed term mean? It may be 3 months, it may be 6 months, it may be 1 year. So that will be as per the suitability of the employer, not the employee. Because you know, unemployment is at all-time high. Then when some employment is there, the terms of employment is bound to be dictated by the employer. The employee has very meager bargaining power in this case. Therefore, this proposition is dissented by a number of trade unions. So that is there in this IR code 2019. Another thing is that strike, the term strike is redefined. Strike means mass casual leave. That's it. If any other mode you want to apply to go for strike, then you need prior permission from the employer, from the government, like that. So that is also contested by trade unions. Even the Bharatiya Janata Party, that supporter trade union, BMS, Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, that also opposes this particular term clause to repeal that, to redefine the term strike. They say that this attempt was made in some states which was not actually implementable. How can you withdraw the rights of workers, employees to go for strike? So it is not doable actually. That's what they oppose in that way. Then I told fixed term employment, strike, then come to term worker. So worker is redefined. It includes person in supervisory capacity also. Earlier, supervisory personnel were not included in the workers category. That is now there, but there is a ceiling. The supervisory capacity workers will be there provided they are getting up to 15,000 a month. Then retaining the obligation to seek prior permission for industrial establishment with 100 or more workers before layoff, retrenchment, closure, with provision of that appropriate government. That is also there, that if a particular firm which has employed more than 100 workers, then it cannot retrench without prior consent and approval of the government. So that is there. Then the firms have to set up a reskilling fund for training of retrenched employee, to which employers should contribute at least 15 days of wages or such other days that may be notified by the central government. That is there. Then it has also provision for negotiating union. Who will negotiate on behalf of the workers? There will be, that body can negotiate if it is having support of 75% or more representation of workers in a trade union. It's a daunting task, but that is there. And there is also provision for industrial tribunal to adjudicate disputes. So that is also there. Then, as I was telling before a while, that the Industrial Relations Code prohibits strikes and lockouts. If it is made, if those are, or these are made without giving 14 days notice and going for it within 60 days. And also during the pendency of a conciliation proceedings, when there is negotiation process, if during that process a union comes for strike, that is also illegal. So that is also a provision. Then if some union or some particular group of workers or any employee violates it, there is stringent punishment for that. Dear students, I had shared one recent newspaper article in which the interview of Bhartrihari Mohta, the MP from Cuttack, who is heading that labor committee of government, and that was also accommodated in that article. So let me say what is the position of this labor committee led by Bhartrihari Mohta, that has suggested that do not limit it to 100. Limit it to means the hire and fire, that kind of policy should be extended to firms with up to 300 employees. Means firms up to 300 employees can fire people and close down without prior consent of government. In addition to this, the Mahtab committee has also suggested that you make it 2 fixed term employment. So retrenchment should not be before that. At least 2 fixed term employment should be there. It's like the at par with the Chinese structure, where 2 fixed term employment is there. But what will be the tenure of the term? So that should be decided mutually by the employer and employee. And Mahtab wants that these two recommendations be part of this industrial relations code. What are they? So not 100, which is suggested in this IR code, that is in the draft. It should be enhanced to 300 employees. So up to 300 employees, the employer can fire them without seeking government approval, prior consent. In addition to that, two fixed term should be there. Fixed term means all the benefits which are given to the regular employees should also be given to this fixed term employee. Students, you might not be knowing this thing, that benefits include, pension, benefits include gratuity, benefits include your some kind of provident fund contributions. So no, pension is not there. The new pension scheme is different from the old pension scheme, but for giving some kind of gratuity, there was a need that an employee must be must have given services up to 5 years, services for more than 5 years. So if this IR code comes to practice, then it will pave way for getting that kind of uh, gratuity, even an employee has given services for less than 5 years. So far I have elaborated two specific codes or specific laws enacted by the central government, or that is in the parliament. Now the third one is social security, welfare and occupational safety aspect. This has already been introduced in Lok Sabha in the name Social Security Code Bill 2009. This paves way for universalization of social security for 50 crore workers in the country, an estimated number, 50 crore. The Social Security Code subsumes 8 central labor laws in this aspect. What are they? They are the Employees Compensation Act 1923, Employees State Insurance Act 1948, Employees Provident Funds and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1952, Maternity Benefit Act 1961, Payment of a Gratuity Act 1972, Senior Workers Welfare Fund Act 1981, Building and Other Construction Workers Cess Act 1996, and Unorganized Workers Social Security Act 2008. So all these 8 acts have been subsumed in the new Social Security Code Bill 2019. So this bill proposes setting up a social security fund using corpus available under Corporate Social Responsibility, CSR Act. So under that act, corporates have to set aside some fund to meet their social responsibility. Now that fund will come to the so-called Social Security Fund. And what will this fund do? This fund will provide welfare benefits such as pension, medical cover, death and disablement benefits to all workers. So these are the welfare aspects. For this you need huge compensation or fund. So this is how the proposal is there. The bill, however, retains employers' provident fund contribution. As per the EPF rule, the employer has to contribute 12% of his basic salary, and the employer will get 12%, and this 12 plus that 12 will be kept in the provident fund, which will be invested in some guaranteed securities, and the proceedings will be given to the employer at the time of their superannuation. And that comes under EEE, means exempt, exempt, exempt. So that is tax-free. But now, in the new Social Security Code, established in 2019, the provision is a bit relaxed from the employee's point of view. What is that? Now, you can contribute less than 12%. I do not know what is exactly 9 or 10%. So that should be contribution from that should be the minimum contribution from the uh, employees, but the employer has to contribute 12%. That is there. Then in this Social Security Code, what is there? The fixed term contract workers will be eligible for gratuity, as I was telling while analyzing the previous one, Industrial Relations Code, that the fixed term contract workers will be eligible for gratuity on a pro rata basis. Pro rata means proportionate basis. Currently, workers are not entitled to gratuity before completing 5 years of continuous service, as prescribed in the Gratuity Act 1972. But once this code will come to force, then all will be eligible. The ministry has also decided to retain the existing autonomy of EPF organization, EPFO, and employees state insurance corporations, rejecting the proposal to corporatize them. So this is about the social security, welfare, and occupational safety aspect. So I was telling in the beginning that there are 4 codes or 4 acts to come, which will subsume all the existing 44s. Now the 4th one, occupational safety, health, and working conditions. Pursuant to the report of the 2nd National Commission on Labour on occupational safety, health, and working conditions of the workers, the Ministry of Labour and Employment has introduced the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2019 in Lok Sabha in July 23rd, 2019. In last year's July, this has already come as a code. What is that code? Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2019. The code simplifies, subsumes, and transforms the provisions of 13 existing central labor legislations, including, inter alia, the Factories Act 1948, the Contract Labor Act 1970, the Building and Other Construction Act, Construction Workers Act 1996, the Cine Workers and Cinema Theatre Workers Act 1981, and so on. So there were 13 central labor legislations which were in relation to occupational safety and health conditions of the workers. Now they are to subsumed, all those are to be repealed. So the new act will be known as the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2019. This is a code. So what are there? The code is applicable to all establishments. I underline all establishments. Previously it was not for all. So all establishment where any industry, trade, business, manufacture or occupation, any kind of occupation coming in the industry and service. So this code is applicable to be carried on, in which 10 or more workers are employed. This is there. Then the code provides for a common registration for all establishment instead of separate registrations under the current clause. So any firm to come to force should have some registration, and one registration will be sufficient to make it eligible for application of all these clauses and codes, laws, whatever. Then an employer is not permitted to engage employees if its establishment is unregistered or its registration has been cancelled. An employer can apply for a common license for operating a factory and for engaging contract labor. Employers should also notify the registering officers of a closure of their establishment. If it wants to exit, then it should notify. And this certified payment of dues, if it has to give the dues to the employees. And the certified payment of dues to all employed workers should also be tabled in the government offices. Then the occupational safety code also makes provision for inspection, stringent inspection. So inspectors are also empowered to supply information and sensitize employers and workers on provisions of all these codes. So if there is any violation, then the inspectors are empowered to take actions also. So that is there. Then the code also enlists the duties of employers as well as employees. So what are the do's and what are the don'ts? So all these are listed. Then it is also there that welfare facilities to be provided by the employer. And what are the welfare facilities? Welfare facilities like there should be good ventilation in the working room. Temperature should also be regulated. If it is quite hot, then workers cannot work there. So that should be congenial. So humidification should be there. Drinking water facilities should also be there. Adequate lighting should also be there. Crèche facilities should also be given. Washing facilities, bathing facilities, locker rooms, shelter rooms. So separate facilities for latrines, urinals for men, women, transgender employees, medical facilities including first aid and ambulance, sitting arrangements, canteen facilities, treatment of wastes as per government rules. All these facilities should also be there. So if you are hiring people, you should provide a good working environment. So that is codified in the new act. Employers are also required to comply with the requirements pertaining to working hours. So how much should be the duration of the work? So that should be defined. And if there are women, then you should take some further precautions. So working hours, annual leaves, night shifts, etc. is applicable, and which were earlier captured only under certain specific current laws. So that is not there, all are unified, then it is applicable universally. So you should have special provisions for women also. As I was telling, crèche facility should also be there. Then you should have some maintenance register. Then that should also be maintained in electronic form, which cannot be manipulated as per the whims of the employer. So that is there. As I was telling, that special provisions for women employee, that they should not be employed beyond 7 p.m. without their consent. If you are employing, then they should give you prior consent. So beyond 7 p.m., before 6 a.m. morning. So that shift cannot be given to them without their consent. So that is there. Holidays, working hours prescribed by the government should also be followed. So that is there. Government can prohibit employment of women in some operations that are dangerous for their health and safety. There is also special provision for contract labor. There is also provision for penalties and remedies. So it's a huge list. So that is on the government website also, around 30 pages. So those who are interested can go through the detail. So these are the attempt of the government. So government has attempted to amend the um, or amalgamate the existing 44 acts, laws, whatever. So it is simplified now to 4 different acts. So many previous acts have been abolished. In addition to that, the government, the Labour Ministry has come out with some new schemes. Some Suvidha that is there. It's a unified labor portal scheme uh, that is to give you timely redressal of grievances, and it also facilitates a self-certification by industry. The logistic part is also being attempted by the government. Then to focus that cutting down on red tape, that when some application comes from a firm, then there should be um, some action on it. It should not be in file. So to focus cutting down red tapeism, um, the government has amended um, all the laws. Okay, it has, you know, just 4 acts are there, and the logistic provision, all these things are also there. But all these things uh, are now relooked from the viewpoint of the small scale industries, which are employing up to 40 workers. So there is a proposal that they should be exempted from 14 basic laws, including Factory Act, Industrial Disputes Act, Maternity Benefit Act. They were being exempted actually. So under the new system, after labor reforms, so whether they are to be exempted or not, so there is a question, and the final answer has not come yet. Then social security schemes are there. Some schemes are for all, some schemes are specifically to the workers. So these are the governmental items. Some of the welfare schemes like social security schemes, Atal Pension Yojana, anybody can enroll. Anybody means there is a age specification that 18 to 40, that is the age group who are eligible to be enrolled there. Then Prime Minister's Jivan Suraksha Yojana, Jivan Jyoti Bima Yojana, then Suraksha Bima Yojana, all these things, Aam Aadmi Bima Yojana. So these are for all, also for workers. Now, I will speak something about the concerns and the challenges. I already gave some analysis while highlighting those 4 specific reforms. Then now to have some kind of discussion on that. Casualization of workforce is a reality in Indian context. 92% of our total employment is in informal sector. Then there is privatization drive, and FDIs are encouraged. So there are challenges that what should be the size of the organized labor. So 92% are in unorganized sector, those who are in 8%. So there are also extra pressure on them. What should be the ideal situation? We have to reduce that 92% and increase this one. that will happen, or it will, the new labor law will um, work in the direction of further casualization. That is a question, and that is being debated in the um, economist, by the economist as well as policymakers, all are there. And it is, labor unions are highly concerned about all this. Then contract labor, that kind of provision which is coming, many people consider that this is a serious assault on workers' right. So that situation, um, that is the day, rule of the day, uh, contract labor, fixed term laborer. So is it an ideal situation to work with? Then, uh, you know, yes, it is good that so many laws have been simplified. Um, you know, 44 central laws, more than 150 state laws, all will go by this labor reform. But uh, social security once again comes as a major issue. That does the new regime, new labor law, address the concern of workers? So suppose a person has worked for 6 months, 2 10 years, 3 months each. You are giving some thousand, bonus, you not bonus exactly, a provident fund, gratuity, all these things which were not applicable to them. You are now giving them. Fine. Suppose a person is fired by just a solitary relief, solitary social security compensation of around say 25,000. So what will be the consequence? Is it adequately protected? The interest of the worker is adequately protected or not? So that is an area which should be seriously looked into. I do not say that there should be rigid labor laws. That should be moderated, simplified, but that should not be at the cost of the social security of existing employees. India has surplus labor that is known, and a large number of unemployed. So when some restrictions or some kind of conditionalities are to be followed by the uh, firms or industries, there is apprehension that they may go for some capital intensive goods production that will further retrench laborers. So capital will replace labor wherever that at the whim and will of the employer that may happen. So how to address that issue? That is also a question to ponder over. So these are the concerns. Uh, you know, these issues are million. These questions are $1 million questions. There have been deliberation up to 2017. Some act, Industrial Relations Act, was tabled. Trade unions vehemently opposed it, but this time the government introduced without consultation of the trade unions. So they say that that is the clandestine way of doing business. Then in a democracy, there should be discussion, there should be deliberation, and attempts should be made to take decisions on the basis of consensus. If consensus is not there, at least everybody should get a chance to debate. and discuss. The government's point is different. Government says that when it is presented in parliament, debate takes place. So the issue has several angles. Some good things, some issues of concern. You know, minimum wage provision that is welcomed by many. So in a nutshell, these are the developments in the labor reform aspect in Indian economy. Challenges are there. So to conclude, what can we say? Now, in the current liberalized Indian economy, changing labor laws is definitely a sensitive issue, necessitating consensus among important stakeholders. The government has done a good work by simplifying the complex nature of the acts, multiplicity of acts, by um, making just 4 different aspects. The wage setting process, the labor market condition, the social safety um, network, social safety nets for workers, occupational safety. So these are the 4 areas of concern. The government has rightly done it, and for this it should be complimented. Of course, greater flexibility in labor laws must be ensured so that firms can adjust to the changes in demand when necessary. The firms should have some freedom to hire and fire because they are the employer. So if the situation doesn't enable them to think about their businesses, then how can manufacturing or service sector will grow? So they should get ample freedom, but this cannot be at the cost of social security of workers. Can it be? The government has to ensure a balancing act in between. Now I remain. Questions are there um, for discussion and for the study at your end. So if your questions come, then that will be a pleasure for me to be engaged with you. I wish that all of you study well and be engaged. Thank you. Thank you so much.